Hello everybody, this is Mr. Schultz, and this is practice 10.4, the basic patterns of genetic inheritance. And we are going to be focusing on pedigrees for this worksheet. So, question 1 says, pedigrees are a very useful tool for tracking genetic disorders through a family. Discuss how a pedigree may be used to determine the likelihood of passing a genetic disease on to the next generation. And so if you're wondering what a pedigree looks like, we talked about them in class, they look like this. And so they're going to show us how genes or diseases can get passed from one generation to the next. So we can follow how a disease can move from one generation to the next. One generation, I'm going to move that over a little bit. One generation to the next, okay? So it is basically showing us how the gene moves. And if we know a parent has it, we can figure out their genotypes, their letters. If we figure out their genotypes, so if we figure out the genotypes of an offspring, of the parents, so the genotypes of the parents we can predict the probability for the offspring. Okay, so question 1, basically we use pedigrees. Kind of we use them to follow how genes move through a family tree, but also they allow us to make predictions too. So like, what's the odds of this couple, if this family never had any chance of having it, what are the chances of their kid having it? Now, in a pedigree, if we look at the pedigree on number 3, there are these different symbols and lines. A circle is a female individual, and a square is a male individual. And then a vertical line represents a generation line, so basically parents to kids. So connects parents to their kids. Okay? And a horizontal line, well, a horizontal line between two numbers, in this case, like between 3 and 4, represents a marriage or a mating pair. So a mating pair. And sometimes we like to think of them as marriages when we're talking about human pedigrees. People actually do pedigrees for their dogs and things like that if they're a purebred. And so 3 says, evaluate the pedigree to below. It is modeling the inheritance of achondroplasia, a dominant disorder, through a specific family. Achondroplasia is a form of dwarfism, and because it has a dominant inheritance pattern, one person only needs to have one dominant allele to have the disease. Answer the questions that follow. So A says the people who have achondroplasia are shaded in black. What is the genotype of every individual who does not have achondroplasia? So if it's a dominant trait, it means that each one of the individuals who are shaded have the trait. So if we used big A for achondroplasia, and I'm just going to kind of shorten it here, little a would be normal height. So it causes a dwarfism. It causes somebody to be shorter than normal, along with some other characteristics. So genotype for every individual who does not have it would be little a. And then B says, hey, add the genotype to the diagram for each person without. So every person who isn't shaded should be little a, little a. All right, so B is done. C says identify the genotypes of individual 2-2 and 2-3. So 2-2 and 2-3. Now, if we look, we know each one has to have at least one big A because they're shaded in. How do we figure out the other A? Well, we have to look at what their offspring are. And so both offspring, they have several offspring. They have 5. So 2 of the offspring don't have the dwarfism. And so they are little a, little a. Now, in order for these 2 offspring to come about, both parents need to have a little a because both parents need to have one to give it. So the identify the genotypes for 11-2 and 11-3, both are big A, little a. And then D, explain how you determined the genotypes. How did I figure this out? Well, they have 2 kids who have little a, so each parent must also have a little a. And then E says, can you accurately determine the genotype of individual 3-1? And so when we look at individual 3-1, we know the first letter is a big A, but we don't know what the second letter is. It could be a little a. So let's say it got its big A from dad. It could get a big A from mom or a little a, and it wouldn't matter. Either big A or little a would still code for the same thing because it just codes for dwarfism. So no matter what, they have the trait, we just don't know what the other letter would be. And oftentimes we'll either leave a blank space like this, or we'll write a question mark. So can you accurately determine? No. We don't know. If the second letter in the genotype, I'm going to move my paper up here a little bit. No, we don't know if the second letter in the genotype is dominant or recessive. It's about a 50-50 chance, by the way. All right, so that's questions 1, 2, and 3. And so now we look on the back page. 4 says albinism is a disease that impacts the skin pigments of an individual. Albinism causes a lack of pigmentation production in people. Albinism is the recessive form of the trait, while normal pigmentation is dominant. Okay? Can 2 parents with albinism have a child that is unaffected? Draw a pedigree with 2 parents who have albinism along with 2 children. And then label the genotype of each individual in the pedigree. So first things first, let's draw our little practice pedigree, or sample one. So here's dad, here's mom, and they have at least 2 kids. We'll go with a boy and a girl. Okay? Now, both parents have albinism. Okay, so both parents, in this case, big A is normal and little a is albino. How do I know? Because normal pigmentation is dominant and albinism is recessive. So if both parents are albino, they're both little a, little a. And what does that mean? Well, it means that both kids also have to be albino. So it says draw a pedigree, and can 2 parents with albinism have a child that is unaffected? They cannot have a child who is unaffected by albinism because neither parent have a dominant allele or gene. Okay? So, 5 says cystic fibrosis is a human genetic disease that is autosomal recessive. So, the trait is autosomal recessive. Cystic fibrosis is a respiratory disease that causes people who are afflicted with it to suffer with excessive buildup of phlegm in the lungs. Construct a family pedigree of 2 unaffected parents with a son who suffers from cystic fibrosis and a daughter who does not. Include the genotype for each person in the pedigree. So, here's dad. Here's mom. Okay? They're going to have 2 kids. They're going to have a boy. They're going to have a girl. All right? Now, we know cystic fibrosis. You could use C, but that's a terrible letter. I'm just going to use F. So big F is normal, and little f is cystic fibrosis. Okay, I'm just going to shorten it to CF for now. It says both parents are unaffected, so that means they both need to have one big F. Okay, and then it says a son who suffers from cystic fibrosis. So we know that's little f, and a daughter. Okay, big F. At least a big F, because it says unaffected daughter. So the daughter does not have it, so she has at least one big F. So if you have an affected kid, but both parents are unaffected, that means that both parents need to be heterozygous. They both need to be big F, little f. So big F, little f, big F, little f. Now, over here, we don't know what that letter could be. It could be, they could have gotten a big F from dad, and they could have gotten a big F from mom, or they got a big F from dad and a little f from mom, or vice versa. So all we know is they have at least one big F. We don't know what the other letter is. We leave it blank, or put a question mark next to it. And that's number 5. Now, number 6 says phenylketonuria is a recessive genetic disorder if both parents are carriers, okay? What is the probability of this couple having a child with PKU? A Punnett square may help with this question. What are the chances of this family having 2 children with PKU? Okay, so, and then you need to remember that if you have a dice roll of 1/6 and then you have another dice roll of 1/6, the odds of getting both at the same time is 1 in 36. So let's take a look. PKU, we're going to use big P for normal, and little p for PKU. Now, you might want to use a different letter if you have a hard time with your big P's and little p's looking the same. It says both are carriers. Carrier is a fancy word for heterozygous. It means they carry the gene, but they don't actually show it. And so if they're both carriers, we're going to put that there. We're going to make our Punnett square really quick. We have a big P and a little p. Big P and little p, and then we're going to run our Punnett square. So right now, if we look at their Punnett square, they have a 1 in 4 chance of their kid having PKU. All right, but we want to know what is the probability of having 2 kids with PKU. So 1 kid equals 1/4. Okay. Both kids is going to equal 1/4 times 1/4, which is a 1 in 16 chance. And if you're curious about what that is as a percent, 1 divided by 16 times 100 is a 6.25% chance. So a 6.25%. So their kids, if they're both carriers, and they want to know what's the chances of having 2 kids that are that have the trait, it's 6.25% chance. Now 7 says genetic testing is frequently done for couples who are attempting to have children to determine the risk of passing genetic diseases on to their offspring. The couple would need to consult with a doctor to have the genetic testing completed. Predict at least 2 questions that a doctor may ask a couple to help guide the testing. So one question they might ask is, do either parents have the trait? Do you actually have it? So do either parents have the trait we're looking at? I added a period before I was ready to be done. Looking at. Okay, so that's one question we could ask. A second question might be, does your family have any history of having that trait? Okay, so for example, if you ever go to the doctor's office, particularly as you get older, they always ask, like, does your family have a history of heart disease, or does your family have a history of diabetes or cancer? And so those are things that a geneticist might ask a couple before they have a kid, particularly if you're worried about something specific. All right, so this is practice 10.4. This is focusing on pedigrees. They're used mostly for humans, but they can be used for any other organism that we're looking at. So make sure if you're struggling with any part of this, make sure you ask questions in class or come in for flex and get some more help.